look at the agenda and then entertain a motion to amend or approve. Big item is hearing from the school district staff.
Move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
So moved. Well, why don't we go ahead and hand things over
Okay,
to
thank you. I'm Jim Anderson. I'm the Chief Finance Officer for Anchorage School District. I think most people know Dave Conley. He's a board member for Anchorage School District. And I'll walk you through real quick the preliminary budget we submitted to the board this past Tuesday. So it's not final yet. There were a large amount of discussions. There might be potential changes. There generally are between the time you first submit it and when it goes final. So on the next Finance Committee meeting or possibly a work session before the Assembly votes on it, we'll go into the final details of what got approved. So if you look at this is just a real quick 30,000-foot overview, but it's pretty good. It's much easier to brief than a 600-page budget book when you have 30 minutes. So if you flip to page 3, you'll see some of the district inputs or investments that we're putting into the district next year. We're continuing to use operational funds by and large. There are some state legislative grants to upgrade wireless access control and intercom upgrades. As you can imagine, with $2.8 billion worth of buildings, the old brass key is they get lost when you have 6,000 employees. So the wireless control, you know exactly who opened the door, when they left. Much better. Visitor management system will tie into local law enforcement and an FBI master database for anybody coming into the school. So we'll be able to know as they come in. It's pretty quick. It's the Raptor system used all over the Lower 48. So you can pre-check people very quickly as they're walking into your schools to see if they're allowed to go through. We're also updating outdated student devices and display tech. And then you'll see we're looking at math curriculum and some other things as well. At the very bottom of this, the one that will stand out and probably be discussed as much with the Assembly as with our own board is that we're recommending a $6 million of our fund balance, which is about 1% roughly, be used to help soften, that means not cut, about 60 additional teachers. Our goal through the whole budget process was try to be as creative as you can without affecting class size, certainly at elementary and if possible at middle and high. And so we've used $4 million in the past, $5 million in the past, and so next year we're recommending $6 million. And we've been able to regain that money and rebuild our fund balance through hiring delays, contract holds, and other things for the past couple of years. We're getting pretty comfortable with it, so I think that will probably fly. If you look at page 4, this is the state's foundation. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, may I ask what the average class size is right now?
They're different at every grade level, and that I don't have memorized.
Okay.
If you look at elementary, when we get to elementary on page 8, I didn't put class size, but if you look at the PTR at elementary,
Put on page 8.
that's the people to teacher ratio. That's much closer to a class size at elementary than it would be equivalent at middle and high school. In middle and high school, you have things like orchestra and band and physical education classes that might have 40, 50 kids in it,
Gotcha.
or AP classes that may have 8 kids in them. So at secondary level, it really is you divide the number of total students by the PTR formula, by the class size. That gives you the number of teachers, and then you have to account for the union mandated planning and prep time for the teachers, and that adds a few more teachers. And that's how we resource the schools with teachers. So
What would be the ideal class size for elementary?
That's a good question. If you believe the Pikus-Oden study, which was given about 7-8 years ago, the district did a big research project with them. At kindergarten through 6th grade, they recommended a class size of 15. At high school, it's up to 25. But when you listen to the discussions at Juneau, it's really confusing. If you look at the Aleutian Islands, they'll have a school with 12 kids in it with 3 teachers. So for them, it's clearly not a class size. You have 4 kids, K through 3, for 1 teacher. So when they look at the state legislation that says, let's look at class size the way Florida does, the way New York does, it really doesn't work in Alaska. For Anchorage, though, we do look at class size. What we found, though, through all the other research, is class size is important, but the most important thing by far is teacher competency and skill set. The second most important for student outcomes and performance is the principals and their ability to lead and affect change. So class size is important, but it's not the most important thing.
Okay, and I'm sorry to get us off track, but I was just thinking about the fact that the school district has been shrinking in size, student-wise.
We have a little over 3,000 students since FY13. So in that time, we've reduced students about 6.5%, a little bit more, and we've reduced staff over 9%. And you'll see as we get through this, it's because by and large, most of our money goes towards staff. And as a result, when you have to make reductions, it can't be in insurance, it can't be in utilities necessarily, it can't be in some of the fixed costs, leases, rents, contracts for equipment that continue to escalate. You can't reduce medical. I think all of us in the room would like to try that. But those costs just continue to escalate. So really it ends up being, by and large, where the district's money is it really is, it's in people. So on page 4 is the Stakes Foundation formula. At the far left, it starts with the average daily membership. The average daily membership is the number of students the state gives us credit for, only K through 12, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, only K through 12 during the first 20 school days of October. So if a kid only comes to class half the day, he only gets a 0.5 FTE full-time equivalent credit that day during the count period. If they are there for 4 hours or more, they get full credit. And then it goes through a formula where it's been discussed in this forum for at least since I've been the CFO the last several years, and at the assembly. The next biggest one is the district cost factor. Alaska has, from the beginning of this formula, always supposed to have been the very cheapest place to live, the cheapest cost of living, or Anchorage, I'm sorry. Anchorage, the cheapest housing, the cheapest everything. So Anchorage has always been 1.0. Everybody else gets more than us just because they're not in Anchorage. There's been a lot of discussions about that, and I'm sure we'll talk about that over the next couple months again. And then you walk through some other factors the state applies. Looking at step 5, the intensive needs factor. An intensive needs student has to qualify in 7 of more than a dozen categories of additional supports. It could be occupational therapy, speech, behavioral therapy, physical challenges, a lot of different things. So the state gives more money for each of the intensive needs students. For us, our biggest growing intensive needs number by far, last 3 years, has been ages 3 and 4, our special ed pre-K. And it's not because, well, it could be we have more in Anchorage. By and large, we started testing year-round. And so now we're getting a hold of these children much earlier, getting them in, and over 70% that go to pre-K are going to a normal kindergarten class, as opposed to starting at kindergarten where a child's behind. So that's been a big success, and as we talk about Senate Bill 6, currently on the Hill, supported by both the governor and both parties in the Senate, you'll see where the pre-K discussion may affect next year's revenue. If you look at page 5, it's just a real quick overview by state function, which is how we account for our funding through their chart of accounts. If you take out district administration and district administration support services, by and large, all those other functions directly allow a school to operate, whether it's the insurance or the utilities or the maintenance or the custodial. And that equals a little over 97% of all the district's funding. So we really don't have the perceived bloat on Northern Lights at 5530 at the Ed Center. That's where all our money is. It really does channel down through the schools. And then you'll see across the bottom kind of where these are only accurate with 0.1%, but that's where we spend our money. Barring any questions, I'll talk real quickly on page 6. If you look at general fund revenue, the last 2 years, the state has given all school districts in the state outside the formula money. The first year it was passed after our budget was already approved, after the city had put out the tax notices. So we got $5.8 million additional in FY19, but we didn't get any additional city money, which was fine. It didn't get approved until July. It was a great effort. 90% of that went towards more classroom teachers. That was the board's decision. For this school year that we're currently in, we got a little over $8.5 million from the state in House Bill 287, and then a couple million from the municipality for a total of about $10.8 million. That sunsets, and we don't know of a bill currently on the floor that would include forward funding next year. So that means we go back to our funding per student 2 years ago as a baseline for next year's budget. There's a couple of changes now that we've figured out where our growth and intensive needs, the special ed pre-K children were coming in. We were able to do a much better forecast on how many more we're going to get next year. We think it's going to be about 60 more. So the actual revenue looks like it's pretty close to last year or this year. So it's total revenue about $573 million versus $572. But those children need a lot of additional supports, so it kind of balances out. So we did have to do reductions in the schools and growth in special education directorate to balance a budget for next year. So if you look at the expenditures, by and large, our expenditures are inflationary. Everything from contract services, utilities. After the earthquake, one of the utility corridors needs a significant amount of repair, so everyone's expecting that to be passed on to the consumers, and of course we're a consumer of electric. And all the other utilities also go up, as well as healthcare. Budget development, you can look through that. The budget assumptions, the only thing I would add to it is that although we don't, I didn't know about Senate Bill 6 when I wrote this. Senate Bill 6 might change our revenue if it gets approved. And it's, so right now the way it's written, near the bottom of it, is it would give us 0.5 FTE credit for 3 and 4 year olds if they were in pre-K, in a state certified pre-K program, which we're one of the few districts with such a program. We have well over 800 kids in pre-K right now. I don't know that the bill will make it all the way through with the verbiage as it's currently written, but if it does, it certainly will provide for some additional revenue. And I'll make sure we update this panel and keep the city informed as to the actual impact. And of all the bills currently out there, Senate Bill 6 is the only one that gives us more revenue, although Harriet Drummond is working on a House bill that would forward fund, but I don't know. I mean, this climate, who knows? We'll see how that goes. So if you look at page 8, it talks at the top about personnel reductions. You'll see the FY20 PTR, that's this current school year, and in order to get to 0, we're recommending that we increase 0.25 at middle school and high school. Really, that's about 6 teachers district-wide. So it's not significant, but it'll give us a little bit of flexibility for unallocated teachers to be able to plug holes as school starts. So every year in October, November timeframe, we do a demographic study of all of Anchorage, and we get an assessment from Northern Economics on where the students are going to be the following year by school. There's always bubbles, though, from that assessment, more here, less here. So we try to keep some unallocated teachers back. So if you have a school that has way large class sizes, we can plug a few teachers in there and get them to a good start. So this allows for that. If you look at the ASD staffing overview, I'm sorry, I should ask if there's any questions. No? Okay. ASD staffing overview at the bottom. If you look at the cuts over the last, since FY13, by and large, the support services instruction has taken the biggest cut percentage-wise, not by numbers. If you look at total numbers, about 60+% of all of our personnel in the district belong to the teachers union. So they're the largest numbers by far. The next, and that's about 3,200 in the general fund. The next largest is Totem, which is our administrative assistants and secretaries. That's about 1,000. So when you look at district admin and support services, it's certainly a much smaller number, but the percentage gives you a little bit of an idea. So instruction is cut about 14.36% over the last 8-9 years. A little more than half of that would have been because of lower enrollment. We've dropped over 3,000 students since 2013. So some of the reduced teachers, you would expect that if PTR even were to have remained the same, you would have expected less teachers. So at least half of the instruction is that. And as you go across, there's some functions like maintenance and operations. Operations is our custodial staff. We've reduced them to where we really can't reduce anymore. So there are people who say, well, if teachers reduce 14%, why doesn't everybody reduce 14%? But you can't have 14% of the schools without being cleaned. You can't have 14% of the schools with no principal. You can't, I mean, there's certain things that you have a minimum at a school, and this chart sometimes gets interpreted in the way that maybe inaccurately. If you look on the far right, special education is the only program that has grown, and it's grown in this time frame 114.6 or 7 FTE, and quite honestly, it's probably going to continue to grow. So those costs escalate every year, and at some point, maybe the state will relook the way the formula is, but certainly not this year. If you look over on page 9, now we'll talk about the substantive changes. The changes at elementary schools. So I talked briefly, and I know I talked like an auctioneer way too fast, but I talked briefly about in the formula, you divide the total number of students by the pupil to teacher ratio. Now you have the teachers. Every teacher by contract gets planning time. So then you add extra teachers to make up for that planning time. Well, about 7 years ago, when the district had a little bit more money than they have now, they hired health teachers to be able to teach health classes at elementary. And it's great because they are certainly focused on health. It's the equivalent of about 15 minutes per class per week, so an hour a month per class at grade level per school. So that was 28 teachers. We had finally come to the point where, despite there certainly is a contingent out there that believes that if we cut the health teachers, that kids will be obese and we'll have more problems with drugs. But quite honestly, 8 years ago, before we had the health teachers, these classes were taught by nurses, PE teachers, and core classroom teachers. We didn't want to affect class size, so that's $2.8 million that we could get at. The next one, certainly emotional for a select group within the city, is the Ignite class. The Ignite is for children who test out as gifted but not highly gifted. We have a highly gifted program at Rogers Park. That's not being touched. The gifted program is a pullout. We had 21.8 teachers in the district, and they would see these kids for about an hour a week. And they could leave their classroom, which is why they called it a pullout. So they're in the middle of class. The Ignite kids would leave, get on a bus, in some cases go to a different school for an hour-long class, and then come back. We had to get to zero. We recognized and have recognized for several years that the Ignite program was designed to supplement learning. It was never designed to advance learning. So it was certainly beneficial because kids are taken out of a classroom where now you've got a bunch of smart kids focused on a topic without the interruptions maybe in a normal classroom. At the same time, it didn't actually focus on, if they're an advanced reader and you're doing a science experiment on volcanoes, that maybe didn't necessarily help you advance in your reading or your math if you're an advanced math student. So what we're going to do, or what we're recommending, is to change the way, redesign that program. Every day students have this thing called What I Need Time, and it's somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour. The teachers during that time, by and large, it's used for children who need additional supports to catch up. And so they help them with their reading, their math, and their skills and everything else. The advanced kids generally get to read a book at a higher level or something else. So we're going to take some of these very experienced Ignite teachers, interview through them, and pick the ones who can be coaches for the schools to help develop a curricular design of that What I Need Time, so kids are actually advancing in their math and English instead of the when time really being focused on those kids who need to catch up. So it'll reach more children over time. It will take some time. Ultimately, it would reach more children, and quite honestly, it saved us almost $2.2 million.
Question about that, through the chair. When you were, I mean, this is like obviously the hot topic out of here.
Very much.
From what I can see.
Well, there's a lot.
And, because these are like the super engaged parents that are really paying attention to this stuff. And so I guess I'm just kind of curious, did you get any feedback from the Ignite teachers in going with this program? I've only heard the parents' perspective, and I'm really curious.
You know what's interesting is if you were to talk to all of the elementary principals and the vast majority of the non-Ignite elementary teachers, you would find a huge groundswell that was unwilling to talk publicly that have been asking us to look at the Ignite program for the last 4 years. Because when a student leaves the classroom, that teacher now, when they come back, has to help that student make up for all the class time that they missed. You'll hear the same thing from principals on 6th grade band and orchestra, which is also a pullout. But we ran the numbers on that. We couldn't. It had other problems if we were to have eliminated that. Yes, on the Ignite teachers every year. I mean, it wasn't 24 hours, less than 24 hours after the budget was posted that we were already getting feedback. It is a great program. No one's going to argue that it isn't a great program. It's just when you've got 46,000 students and your revenue is not what you need, then that's what our focus was.
So Monday I probably got 15, 20 emails on it, and that was less than 24 hours after it had been announced. Tuesday night I got another maybe 20 to 25. Last night I was up probably 30 emails about Ignite, and at the meeting we had between 10 and 12 parents and students testify against the reduction.
Every year, because Ignite is always talked about, for the last 3-4 years since I've been the CFO, every year they testify on Ignite, whether it's in the cut list or not, just to make sure it doesn't get cut. But I will tell you, we cut one assistant principal position and had 5 people at the board meeting wanting to talk about that. We cut $210,000 for the dome rental for spring softball or soccer and track, and I personally received 11 emails asking why we wouldn't cut hockey or any other sport. The challenge, and the city faces the same challenge, is when you have to do a reduction, guaranteed there's a niche group that's the heart and soul of their life, and anything but that is acceptable. And so yeah, Ignite, it's every year. Yes.
Yes.
I have a question regarding teacher retention, and I don't know if this is an issue. There was a couple of stories in the last couple of weeks about teacher retention, and certainly in some of the rural districts related to the benefit package that they receive. Is this something that's a discussion in ASD? Looking
Every
at
year.
police social security?
Every year. In fact, one of our board members this Tuesday asked us to look into could we, as a standalone unit, offer Social Security to our teachers. And so we're working with the state now to figure out what the rules and everything else would be for us to bring to the board and find out. The reality is, if we were to implement, if it got voted on by ADA and got approved and the board said yes, and 8 months later, which is about how long it takes, the state finally said yes, rough estimate, it would cost the district $19 million or about 200 teacher positions to be able to fund the Social Security. I think it's going to be a discussion with the board for a while. It's being at statewide. NEA has been talking about it at Juneau for the past 2 years, at least. I don't know. I mean, the state doesn't know how they're paying for PERS and TERS. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what traction it has, but I think the board will talk about it. It isn't something that could happen quickly at all. I mean, this is like a year-plus long process to even get to the point where you could implement it. And we're still getting information from the state, so we'll probably start briefing the board in the next week or two, and then keep getting more information over the next couple months. But we'll give an update in a couple months. But it's a pricey endeavor. But as you said, there's retention issues. The rural is almost 40%. Urban is about less than 20, but still very high. So.
And
Yeah.
we're not totally clear what the process would be yet.
Right.
Or how to do it either.
We only know portions of it. We know hypothetically it can be done, but we've got a lot of work to do to even get to the point where the board could even decide whether to offer it. Then we'd have to do fiscal notes, which would help inform. I can't imagine the board would make a decision on that until sometime next year, just because it hasn't been done before, and even the state is not prepared to. It's been a long time since they've had Social Security, so they got to figure out the mechanisms, and then it gets more complicated, right? Because if you're Tier 1 or Tier 2 TERS, you already have a defined contribution retirement plan. So can you do it just Tier 3, or does it have to be all of them? We simply don't know. There'll be a lot of lawyers involved with helping us figure it out.
Thank you.
So really, those are the big changes in elementary. We had to add some librarians to be able to help up planning time, because when the health class was done, that meant that was part of the teacher's planning time. So we had to make up for that. So there were some additional PE teachers, some additional librarians, but at the end of the day, it was a significant cost savings for the district to redesign the way we do health training. Some of it was already taught in science classes, so really doesn't have to be taught twice. Some of it was already taught or close in PE, so there's going to be some savings in that. I would say the big change for the folks in this room is not Health and Ignite and the people you talk to. The big change is recommending 1 day a week, probably Wednesday, although it could be Tuesday or Thursday, a 1 hour late start for school. When we made these reductions, teachers get 240 minutes per week planning time by contract. We were able to give them 210 one minute, 270 the next, for a total of 480, but we couldn't give them 240 minutes a week. So this late start, one, gives them the planning time for that 1 week, but more importantly, the one thing elementary schools have never had is team time or professional learning time for professional development during the week. So two of the 4 weeks it would be for teacher prep time. 2 of the 4 weeks it could be used for teachers getting together to talk about children who need help and working out different mechanisms to help the students get better. It could be one-on-one, it could be professional development from the district, it could be a lot of things. This is somewhat common in the lower 48, just hasn't been done in Anchorage. So I suspect there are going to be parents who initially, just like when we tried to talk about changing school start times, what about childcare? What about my job? The hours that I work? I would think of everything in this budget, honestly. I don't think it's Ignite and Health that a lot of the community members will worry about. I think it will be those with younger children who have childcare concerns. Every other place that's done it that we can find, the cities have worked it out. Just like when they changed school start times in other cities, it all worked out. It's just a change. And by and large, human beings don't like change. We like it the way it's been.
What's the budgetary impact of that early release? Is there one?
Oh, we would have had to hire significant more teachers, and at the end of the day, we probably wouldn't have been able to save the $2 million that we saved. So that's kind of it. So if you look, and I'm sorry, are there any more questions? Okay. If you flip the page to middle schools, there's not a significant change in middle schools. The PTR was changed by 0.25, but that's 2.6 teachers spread across 10 schools. Not a significant difference at middle school. However, the late start, 1 day a week, is also going to help us have time for professional development for the middle school teachers that we really contractually don't have a lot of time to help our teachers teach better. And it goes back to the discussion about class size. Is class size the most important? No, it's number 3 or 4. The most important is competent, trained teachers and then principals. So we think that the benefit of this is the professional development that otherwise they would never get. And then high schools also at 0.25, really 3.6 or 3.8 teachers over 8 schools. Not a significant difference on class size. We did reduce 1 assistant principal, a couple security staff, and by and large, high school has taken the brunt of our cuts the last 3 straight years. It was time to stop. So
Yeah.
I just see the footnote here that dome funding's reduced, and you mentioned, I think it was
$210,000.
That's the total, isn't it?
Yes,
But that's all that the ASD pays to the dome, is 210.
that's what we paid just for spring sports.
Right. Okay, and when will that be going into effect in this, or, I mean, is that
No,
going
no, this fiscal year's already set.
Right, but
It
will
would be next spring.
phased in over some period, or will it be immediate?
It would be next spring. What happened is, a few years ago, when the dome collapsed, I think everyone remembers, there was a significant amount of panic in the district. We had spring sports. Well, what we ended up doing was the first year, through volunteers and other stuff, shoveling off the fields and everything else. Now, and I can't remember his name, I don't know if you remember it, Stephen mentioned it. Anyway, now we have someone who comes out and they snow blow all of our practice fields in the springtime so we can start spring sports earlier outside, the way every other district in the state does it. So before that, though, we did not have someone who came in and cleared our fields so we could do spring sports earlier. We used the dome, but we found out when the dome failed that we were still able to do spring sports. We kept it in the budget, not, you know, I don't know 3 years ago why, or 2 years ago why we didn't look at it then, but this year we were really looking. Lance might be the only one in the room that understands, but you have organizational codes for every department, and then you have object codes that cover every single type of expense. We were at object code level at every department level this year to get to zero, and we got down to the dome. And we've realized we can still do spring sports. We have schools that don't go to the dome, and they're still doing it from Eagle River because it's too far to drive to go to the dome for an hour of so. But you know, I've had a lot of people contact me, and we have FOIA requests in now asking for detailed information about the cost of hockey versus spring sports, and there's always a niche group. It doesn't.
Yeah, my concern is really from the safety element. I mean, just, you know, hard frozen turf in the early spring, and you know, I know there's a lot of orthopedic surgeons who commented on the number of torn ACLs at the high school level when the dome was down and things like that.
I'm sure we're going to hear a lot. At the same time, we're also going to be doing spring sports the way every other district does spring sports. So, at some point, there's I forgot what the phrase was, but our AEA president, the teachers union, he said there isn't, every decision's a bad decision, and honestly, that's kind of how we felt when we did this. So, and I don't know, again, the board hasn't voted on this. It's a little premature for me to look real confident, thinking it's going to go through just like this. But I suspect it'll be close, and then we'll just provide an update after that. So if you look at alternative schools, we had one school, really minor changes at alternative schools. A security reduction at Polaris was a little emotional at Tuesday's meeting. They would also get the early start or late start once a week or early release. And again, really for professional development. If you look on the very last page, district level changes, there are quite a few. There's always departmental reorganization going on. It happens year round, just like in the city. But this provides a general overview. Again, the biggest growth was SPED, or special education, by about 35 FTE, spread across from TAs to OTPT to teachers. We have federal requirements to meet, so that continues to grow. I hope I didn't go too long. I don't know if I went over. But
No, I think you're good.
That's,
We didn't have it timed down to the minutes.
okay. That's kind of the brief overview.
Is there a breakdown for non-school staff, like the nutrition center and contracting?
Oh,
How
there
come
is.
that isn't
If you look at the budget, well, this is just for the general fund, the operating fund. The transportation fund is separate. Capital fund is separate. Student nutrition is separate. Student activities is separate. Grants is separate. We have all of those funds in the big 600-page budget book. It's online. If you look under hot topics in on the district website, you'll see budget. Something just says something to do with budget underneath hot topics, and there's a link. So if you want to look at the funds, it's in the last 70% of the budget book, and it's detailed out every fund.
So my understanding was that the for the capital budget that the school district would be was migrating to a bonds to the voters every other year.
That's correct. We want to do multi-year bonds. So this year's bond, just a little over 83 million, I think, or 82 million. And so, assuming this passes, we will not come back for another bond next year. So you've got about an $82 million requirement over 2 years, and over the next 2 years, we're going to pay off a little over $111 million. So the gross or net at the end would be still staying far under the total amount of retired debt. But what it allows us to do is give us confidence on some multi-year projects with the funding to be able to do design, bid, build, instead of let's do a design and hope the next one gets approved. And then you don't know. So should you have designed something that won't ultimately get approved or not? And every year, the real challenge is all of us want to talk about having a strategic plan. So we have about 100 facilities. And how do you have a strategic plan when every year in April you're only working 9 months out? I mean, that's your real strategic plan is for the next year. But if we can go to multi-year, then we can start looking at what facilities are we going to replace 8 years from now or 5 years from now, and once we can start informing the community, seeing how multi-year bonds work, it lets them know that if you live at Inland View, or let's take Eagle River, Chukiak, not always the strongest supporters of bonds, but we'll see. But if they know that they're going to get a school renovated in 2 years, or 4 years, but they're looking at a current bond that says, well, why would I vote for this if there's no Eagle River schools on it? Well, they're going to see this long-term plan is once this one gets approved, you're next in the hopper, and they'll be able to see this longitudinal plan laid out, but it really requires multi-year bonding. Matsu, several years ago, went to a 5-year bond. They promised their taxpayers they wouldn't come back in 5 years, and they didn't. And it allowed them to make huge, significant leaps on strategically setting the chessboard for where they needed schools because they didn't have to rely on what's the priority next year.
So the delta between what this bond will be versus what's being retired over 2 years doesn't necessarily mean that property taxes will go down because the new bond debt is 100% taxpayer paid versus the debt that's being retired is still being somewhat subsidized by the state.
It is.
And it's almost impossible to calculate because of how complex it is. It's based on a series of bonds sold over many years, some of which are you know, the stronger reimbursements are being retired quicker than the ones that were reduced reimbursement and some that have no reimbursement.
Yeah, to be honest, talking bond debt is really a struggle because if we sell a $40 million bond, but that spring, whenever you sell a bond, you have 3 years to expend all of that money or you get fined by the federal government on arbitrage rules, and the city's in the same boat for that, for construction, for geo bonds. So we look at our projects, and when we sell a bond, we're really looking at 18 months out. What we think we're going to spend so we don't get in trouble in that 2.5 year mark and take a huge penalty from the federal government. So when you pass a bond for $40 million, there's a lot of people who want to know, well, how much that can affect me in May? Well, quite honestly, it's April now. We're not going to sell this bond between April 7th and May 15th anyway, so it's not going to affect you at all for a whole year. And then next year we'll do a sell, but it wouldn't be the whole $40 million. It'll be some portion of that $40 million. But we also have 3 other 1-year bonds that we're selling portions of every year, and it's, you know, we do try to simplify our explanations, and every 10 years on a 20-year bond, somewhere the 7 to 12 year mark, we can refund it potentially. Or refinance. And so you refinance this bond and you get a better interest rate, and so you've saved money there, but you don't know what you're going to refinance next year when you're talking to a voter in March. And it's, so we try our best to come up with what we really think it's going to be the following year. But, you know, the Anchorage estimated property value has a lot to do with it as well. We always work on what was the estimated property value 2 years prior. And so we have the numbers, but it's bonds are difficult to talk. It's always a pleasure going to community council meetings. And I know Dave's been doing it now for a while, so, but yeah, I know your question was just a multi-year bond, so I guess the short answer is yes.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Other questions? District budget? Yeah.
Really quick, are teachers required to be part of the union, or they can choose to be?
No, they are not required. We have some teachers who have chosen not to pay union dues.
Thank you.
Probably in every union.
Let's see, other questions on the ASD? Yeah. Did you want to add something, Lance?
I did. I was waiting for you to be done with the members.
Thanks very much for the. I think I actually made an oversight and skipped over the assembly, and so Forrest, did you want to say anything from the assembly perspective? Any updates?
No, I mean, I think you all saw what happened, I assume. So we passed on one version of the alcohol tax to the voters and didn't pass the other, the sales tax, and that's pretty much it. Now it's up to the voters to decide. In terms of things that are coming up, I have seen there is a draft out there now for a tax on vaping products, but I think that it will probably not be introduced till after the election, so that it doesn't become a football and the alcohol tax debate. It'll be under the tax cap though, so it won't raise any additional revenue. Basically, right now, I think I've told you before, we have cigarettes, we have other tobacco products, and we have vaping products that are exempt from all tobacco taxes. And so it's mostly about taking those vaping products and including them in the other tobacco products category. And other than that, I don't know if I have anything that's really pressing. Because the upcoming next week's meeting, the agenda is, there's some stuff on there, but nothing nearly as controversial as the last month.
The vaping tax is it's a relatively small amount of money that we estimated to bring in. I think.
Yeah, it was. Well, it depends on what level you set it at, but yeah, it's always in the. It's nothing like, I think we bring in $20 million from the cigarette tax, and it's nothing even remotely that much.
Excellent. Any other questions for Forrest? Then Lance, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. I just have maybe to go back to the school district a little bit, just to remind the board, their task is to submit a budget after the school board's done with it, to give it to the assembly, give it to the clerk on March 2nd. That's required by code. Your next meeting is the 5th. What I would ask, maybe of two pieces. First, Jim, is there something specific you would like the Budget Advisory Commission to focus on in the budget? And if you are thinking about some things, if you could either let me know now or let the board know, so that, there's a 600 or 800 page budget is a lot to consume, and sometimes it's mostly important for either for the municipality and for the district, just to ask them to focus on the things that you really want them to look into. Because what happens when the budget goes to the assembly, they don't get to pick firefighters and planners. They get to pick the number, but they don't get to pick what happens in the number. Same thing with the capital budget. So I think, but from what's going on inside the budget, you do get to make a recommendation to the assembly and I think the school district would appreciate your insight if you saw some things that you have interest on. So I do, at the end of the day, where the board should make, the Budget Advisory Commission should make a recommendation to the assembly with some things on it if you so require. You basically have almost 2 months to do it. So I would just, if there's something that you want them to focus on, let us know, and then we need to schedule some time.
I think as soon as we get the budget finalized, I certainly can make sure you have a digital copy to share with the BAC.
Okay.
And then we can talk any changes from this meeting. And if there's any deep dive needs for information, we'll certainly try to answer those questions.
When will the board be done with when will they be done with their actions that you could give them, obviously before the 2nd of March?
You can ask Mr. Donnelly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sometime, so my point being is that if the BAC is to make a recommendation on the budget, it will be when you're done with it after March 2nd. So their effort needs to be between the 2nd and the 24th.
Right, and I think their meeting after the 2nd is the 10th, right?
Whose?
The assembly.
Yes. So what happens, you're going to give it.
This is the first year where there's actually a chunk of time in between the time we have to get the budget book to the assembly
And when the
their
assembly
next
will
meeting
introduce
for
it.
their first non-action.
That's correct. So it will go to the clerk on the 2nd. It will get introduced as an introduction item on the 10th. Then they hear it as soon as the 24th of March. So, okay. So we should plan on getting together when we have it. And then obviously can take some time to see what they're currently thinking about right now.
We would normally have a work session sometime between now and
The end of February-ish.
Yeah, right. So probably what we need to do is schedule a work session and determine, a resolution with our recommendation.
And I think we need to schedule that resolution, we need to schedule that work session after the board has made their decisions on, if they're gonna move this around significantly, it should be after that point.
So, sorry, so you're saying they are going to vote on the second, and our next meeting is
On the 18th of February, our board will vote.
And there's a twist to that. At the meeting, the board decided that if, on the 18th, we significantly, I don't know what the right terminology is, but if there was such a change that we felt the public needed another shot at public testimony, that we would come back with some sort of special meeting and allow for that.
Okay.
So it's got to be after February 18th, but before March
24th.
2nd. Yeah. Or
Well,
before March 24th.
I think when the assembly gets it, we're gonna know what the board has ultimately decided on.
Yeah.
And then you have 3 weeks to make a decision, to make a recommendation to I don't think if it gets delivered on the 2nd, you're gonna be able to act appropriately on the 5th. I think there's gonna be some work sessions, so I think right now we should plan on, sometime between, if the board acts at the soonest, it would be after the 18th of February, which is a Tuesday, and the 2nd of March.
Should we just put it to a doodle poll maybe?
Yep, let me find out how they're doing, and then I will
Yeah.
poll you.
Yeah, okay, let's do that then.
Okay.
So we can,
Okay.
make a recommendation.
Thank you. So Lila and Aaron did a great job summarizing the strategy session that you guys had. You don't have it because I haven't finished my thoughts on it to give it to you. I would say it's 90% done. I will send it to you electronically. The format looks very much like the same. And again, I appreciate your time that we took on that day in January. So I very much appreciate that. I will forward that to you. I'm sorry that I don't have it available for you today. One of the things that I did send in your packet is we talked about at the strategy session was assigning departments for review. So I've included a spreadsheet. I've modified it slightly. What's not on here is the school district. I mean, obviously that could be a whole important piece of review that's not here. Maybe the timing isn't good because the whole purpose of this now is so that you guys could get ahead of our 21 budget. Obviously, if we were to do the school district, you'd want to start getting into their world sometime probably between October and January before they submit their budget. But what I ask you guys, take a look at this. If you have departments that you want to weigh in on, let me know. I have a version of this I will send you, because the other thing that I did is I put what I thought would be the level of effort, low, medium, or heavy, medium, and light. So if you pick a department, in my sense of your time and commitment to actually do a good job, is it a department that's going to be simple like audit, or is it going to be a heavy and a lot of work like fire, police, and streets? So I'll revise that to you, but if you guys want to start doing this, I would either work through me and work through Nolan. My job will be to set it up and get you guys started before your next meeting. So if you have some thoughts about this or commitments, I mean, Jed, if you want to take on transit, and Tasha, if you want to take on whoever you had, health, I will start setting it up with Natasha and with Jamie, and you guys can start going in, because June's going to be quick.
Do we want to or have people look at these to.
Yep, to me.
you and we can maintain the spreadsheet.
I will do that.
And Lance, the version that you sent around does have that workload
Okay.
column, so
Okay.
it's just.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that will just give you a perspective. So if you know, if Lindy, if she picks audit and has no idea about how much work that would be, there's 3 people in there, and it's a $700,000 budget. You can do it in 2 hours. If you pick the health department or parks, you better buckle in because you're going to spend some time.
Thanks. I'd like
So-
to switch to audit, please.
Well, you can do both. So that's what I want you guys to do. That. So confirm what you got, and I'll set you up. Okay, get you rolling there. The next thing I need is actually an action item, because one of the things that we did talk about was changing the meeting, changing the time of the meeting, and you guys need to basically vote on that to start your meetings at 11:30. We'll go to 1. We will do this kind of stuff, these kind of short reportings at the beginning of the meeting, and then we will book the back end of it for presentations and work sessions and things like that. So what we'll do is, if you agree to that, we'll have it on the record. Lila will then will change the schedule on the website from 11:30 to 1:30, because we post these meetings. And that's one of the reasons. And we would start in March. We'll start it next month. And I recognize that your calendars will, things will jump in and that, but that's what you guys want to do. We're on board, and we'll make it happen. But I need you guys to decide that on the record.
Yeah, we seem to have a consensus on that before. Does anyone want to make a motion to start our monthly meetings at 11:30, the first Thursday of the month?
Second.
Any discussion or opposition to that?
I'd like to add a friendly amendment that there's cookies at every meeting.
Are you going to bake them?
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Rotating.
No, well, I think we can make that happen.
I would support that.
I removed my, I recall my amendment.
Withdrawn. Okay.
Withdraw, yeah.
How about coffee?
Yeah, Uncle Leroy's coffee.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll bring it in.
Carrot.
You got it.
We have the water, so that's.
I know. As long as I don't see.
We can make little dreams come true. It's the impossible stuff. It takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, as long as that's not here.
Okay.
So it's moved, so it's decided on it.
Seconded, do we have to vote?
Do we need to?
Yes, please.
All right, all in favor of 11:30 start time for the meeting?
Yes.
Aye.
Okay.
Any opposition?
Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
I think we've got a couple minutes just to let you guys know how we're doing on closing 19. I thought that the budget for 19 would be done this week, but it's not. We've got some closing to work on. That will then give us our year-end projections on spend. I still think it's going to be very close. We haven't had any changes in our revenues. I think still we're going to be about $1.5 million to $1.7 million over our budgeted amount, which is less than 1% out of $730 million. We're $1.7 million off. So I think our expense side is going to be pretty good. We give the Assembly a monthly report. We'll be doing a year-end report. We'll send that to you guys so you can just see how we're doing. Again, I really appreciate your time with me and Aaron and Andy last time, and I will get you guys rolling with the departments, because I do think that's going to help you dive into when we're doing the 21 budget. Depending on what happens with the legislature, depending on what happens with revenue sharing, depending on what happens with the school district, all of that, it will influence, and how we, come to closure on the ML&P. All of those things are going to make a difference on what 21 looks like. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Also wanted to thank OMB, Lance and Lila for the work for the strategic planning session 2 weeks ago. So I know you guys put a lot of work into that. I think that was really successful. So thank you very much for that.
Appreciate it. Yep.
Any other last minute items to discuss?
I don't have anything for you.
So we'll probably do a doodle poll for a work session, and then do we have a topic for March meeting?
It will be the school district. The other, as for an informational topic, well, March, we may be getting into the first quarter budget revisions.
Okay.
And if you guys are interested, if you guys are interested to know how the property assessments are gonna be looking for 2020, can have the appraiser come and give you some of that joy. But I will let you know. But right now, probably be 1Q in the school district.
Very good. All right, motion to adjourn.
Motion to